Welcome to this congregation where we seek to foster community, to grow our spirits, to serve others, and to work for justice. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your background, we are glad that you're here and we hope you feel welcomed. Please join us after service in the cafeteria, which is right through these doors, for coffee and fellowship. Tomorrow, January 15th, is MLK Day of Service. Please join us at 9 a.m. at Liberté. See Rich for information on ways you can help. I don't believe Rich is here today. See Bernie instead. You can find information on ways to be involved and connected in your order of service. Please also check out our greeters table, which is right back there when you came in, for the January edition of our Fellowship Journal and Touchstone's January materials relating to this month's theme, justice. Our speaker today is Emily Quarles-Mowrer. Emily is a lifelong Unitarian Universalist and has been an active member of the worship committee for more than 9 years at UU Fellowship of Pottstown. We welcome her back to our sacred space. Let us enter into worship together.
Our opening song today has a little refrain at the end of each verse. If you'd like to join in, and it's something of a little reminder, a little mantra that you can also say to yourself outside of the song. I know, we can find a better way. It goes like this. I know. Try that with me. Let's try it. I know, we can find a better way. One more time. I know, we can find a better way. On a bus in Alabama, Rosa paid her fare. She came upon a sign that said she couldn't sit there. And though her voice was weary, the driver heard her say, I know, we can find a better way. On a stage in San Francisco, as he stood before the crowd, Harvey showed us he could lead, honest, brave, and proud. And all across the city, the people heard him say, I know, we can find a better way. I know, we can find a better way, a better way. Together we can raise our voice and make a brand new day. If Rosa could and Harvey could, then surely we can too. A better way depends on me and you. As I sit here in the circle, I look at you all around. I hear that change is coming. The sound is getting loud. And now that I can feel it, I can add my voice to say, I know, we can find a better way. I know, we can find a better way. I know, we can find a better way.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to invite you, if you are young in body or in spirit, to come on up to listen to a story. All right, so you guys know who this guy is? This is Martin Luther King Jr., and he is the reason you're not going to school tomorrow. So this is a book called Martin's Big Words, and it's by Doreen Rappaport, illustrated by Brian Collier. Everywhere in Martin's hometown, he saw signs, white only. His mother said that these signs were in all southern cities and towns in the United States. And every time Martin read the words, he felt bad. Until he remembered what his mother told him. You are as good as anyone. In church, Martin sang hymns, and he read from the Bible, and he listened to his father preach. These words made him feel good. And when I grow up, he said, I'm going to get big words too. So Martin grew up. He became a minister like his father. And he used the big words he had heard as a child from his parents and from the Bible. Big words like everyone can be great. He studied the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi. He learned how the Indian nation won freedom without ever firing a gun. Martin said love when others said hate. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. He said together when others said separate. He said peace when others said war. Sooner or later, all the people of the world will have to discover a way to live together. So in 1955, on a cold December day in Montgomery, Alabama, a woman named Rosa Parks was coming home from work. And a white man told her to get up from her seat on the bus so he could sit down, and she said no, and she was arrested. Montgomery's black citizens learned of her arrest, and it made them angry. They decided not to ride the buses until they could all sit wherever they wanted. So for 381 days, do you know how long that is? Yeah, over a year. For over a year, they walked to work and to school and to church, and they walked through the rain, and they walked through the cold, and they walked in the blistering heat, because it's Alabama. It doesn't get that cold, but it gets really hot. You did? Awesome. So you know about the hot, huh? Oh, yeah. Cool, welcome. Oh, wow, even hotter. So So Martin walked with them, and he talked with them, and he sang with them, and he prayed with them until the city leaders had to agree that they could sit anywhere they wanted on the bus. When the history books are written, someone will say there lived black people who had the courage to stand up for their rights. So in the next 10 years, black Americans all over the South protested for equal rights. Martin walked with them and talked with them and sang with them and prayed with them, while ministers told them to stop. Mayors and governors and police chiefs and judges ordered them to stop. But they kept marching. Wait. For years I have heard the word wait. We have waited more than 340 years for our rights. They were jailed and beaten and murdered, but they kept on marching. Some black Americans wanted to fight back with their fists, but Martin convinced them not to by reminding them of the power of love. Love is the key to the problems of the world, he said. Many white Southerners hated and feared Martin's words. A few threatened to kill him and his family. His house was bombed, his brother's house was bombed, but he didn't stop. Remember, if I stopped this movement, the movement will not stop because God is with this movement. The marches continued. More and more Americans listened to Martin's words, and he shared his dreams and filled them with hope. You may know this quote already, but I'm going to read it anyhow. He said, "I have a dream that one day in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers." You guys heard that before? Yeah. And after 10 years of protests, lawmakers in Washington voted to end segregation, and all the white-only signs in the South came down. Dr. Martin Luther King cared about all Americans. He cared about people all over the world, and people all over the world admired him. So in 1964, he won the Nobel Peace Prize. He won it because he taught others to fight with words and not with fists. Martin went wherever people needed help. In April 1968, he went to Memphis, Tennessee. He went to help garbage collectors who were on strike. And he walked with them, and he talked with them, and sang with them, and prayed with them. And on his second day there, he was shot. And he died. But his big words are still alive for all of us today. So thank you for listening to the story with me.
The following song comes to us as a theme to the movie Selma by John Legend and Common. And as always, there's a little refrain. Feel free to join in if you feel so moved. One day, when the glory comes, it'll be ours, it'll be ours. Whoa, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure, we will be sure. Oh, glory, glory, glory.
Heavens, no man, no weapon formed against. Yes, glory is destined. Every day, women and men become legends, since they go against. lessons. The movement is a rhythm to us. Freedom is like religion to us. Justice is juxtaposition in us. Justice for all just ain't specific enough. One son died, his spirit is revisiting us. True and living in us. Resistance is us. That's why Rosa sat on the bus. That's why we walk through Ferguson with our hands up. When it go down, we woman and man up. They say stay down and we stand up. Shots, we on the ground, the camera panned up. King pointed to the mountaintop, and we ran up.
One day, when the glory comes, it'll be ours, it'll be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure, we will be sure. Oh, glory, 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 glory. Now the war isn't over, victory isn't won, and we'll fight on to the finish. And then when it's all done, we'll cry glory, oh glory, oh glory, oh glory. We'll cry glory, oh glory, oh glory, oh glory.
Summer is now for every man, woman, and child. Even Jesus got his crown in front of a crowd. They marched with their torch, we gonna run with it now. Never look back, we done gone hundreds of miles. From dark roads, he rose to become a hero. Facing the League of Justice, his pure people. Enemy is lethal, a king became regal. Saw the face of Jim Crow under a bald eagle. The biggest weapon is to stay peaceful. We sing, our music is the cuts that we bleed through. Somewhere in the dream we had an epiphany. Now we right the wrongs in history. No one can win the war individually. It takes the wisdom of the elders and young energies. Welcome to the story we call victory. The coming of the Lord, my eyes have seen the glory.
One day, when the glory comes, it'll be ours, it'll be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure, we will be sure. Oh, glory, 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 oh, glory, oh, glory,
And I get to follow that. But luckily I have Martin Luther King Jr. to read. So. This is actually a transcript from an audio recording from 1957 So a little background on this. Martin Luther King Jr. was asked to give a prayer at Billy Graham's New York Crusade. And, Martin Luther King Jr. was known nationally by this point. And even so, King's appearance at the crusade was not really well received by some of the white Christian conservatives who supported Graham. And following King's prayer, Graham himself preached a sermon that dismissed the structural methods of the civil rights movement in favor of individual conversion. So King actually was never invited back, even though they really agreed on a lot of doctrinal issues. The social issues divided them. So they were distanced. But this is what he said at this Billy Graham crusade. Let us pray. O God, our Heavenly Father, out of whose mind this great cosmic universe has been created, toward whom the weary and perplexed of all generations turn for consolation and direction, we come before thy presence this evening, thanking thee for the many blessings of life. We come recognizing our dependence on thee, but we also come, O God, with an awareness. The fact that we have not always given our lives to that which is high and noble. In the midst of all the high and noble aspects of justice, we followed injustice. We stand amid the forces of truth, and yet we deliberately lie. We stand amid the compelling urgency of the Lord of love as exemplified in the life of Jesus Christ, and yet we live our lives so often in the dungeons of hate. For all of these sins, O God, forgive. And in these days of emotional tension, when the problems of the world are gigantic in extent and chaotic in detail, give us penetrating vision, broad understanding, power of endurance, and abiding faith. Save us from the paralysis of crippling fear. And, O God, we ask thee to help us work with renewed vigor for a warless world and for a brotherhood that transcends race or color. We thank thee this evening for the marvelous things which have been done in this city and through the dynamic preachings of this great evangelist. And we ask thee, O God, to continue blessing him. And as we look forward tonight, grant that our hearts and our spirits will be open to the divine inflow. All of these things we ask in the name of him who taught us to pray. He wrote this in 1957. But it's equally appropriate now.
Talk to me so that you can see what's going on, what's going on, what's going on, what's going on. Mother, mother, everybody thinks we're wrong. but who are they to judge us? Simply 'cause our hair is long. You know we've got to find a way to bring some understanding in today. Oh, picket lines and picket signs, don't punish me with brutality. Just talk to me so that you can see, oh, what's going on, what's going on, what's going on, what's going on, oh, what's going on, what's going on, what's going on, what's going on, oh, what's going on, what's going on, what's going on.
Bending toward justice. So I know you all probably recognize the quote that this title is taken from. It runs, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." You know, in 2016, the Daily Beast reported that President Obama had that phrase woven into a rug that he put in the Oval Office. That's how much it means to him. He wanted to be able to see it every day. Now, the quote is most closely associated, at least in my mind, I don't know about you, with Martin Luther King Jr. He used it once in 1964 to close out a commencement speech at Wesleyan, and before that he spoke of the arc of the moral universe in an article that he wrote for the February 1958 edition of The Gospel Messenger. And this is what he wrote. I can't resist quoting him. "A fifth basic fact about the method of nonviolent resistance is that it is based on the conviction that the universe is on the side of justice. It is this deep faith in the future that causes the nonviolent resistor to accept suffering without retaliation. He knows that in his struggle for justice, he has cosmic companionship. There is a creative power in the universe that works to bring low gigantic mountains of evil and pull down prodigious hilltops of injustice. This is the faith that keeps the non-violent resistor going through all of the tension and suffering that he must inevitably confront. Those of us who call the name of Jesus Christ find something at the center of our faith which forever reminds us that God is on the side of truth and justice. Good Friday may occupy the throne for a day, but ultimately it must give way to the triumph of Easter. Evil may so shape events that Caesar will occupy a palace and Christ a cross, but that same Christ arose and split history into AD and BC so that even the life of Caesar must be dated by his name. Yes, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." Reading the words of Martin Luther King Jr. always affects me powerfully. And if you have a chance to look up his whole article, it's amazing. That was just like one point that he made out of like 6 points. But in that article, that last phrase that we're all so familiar with, he actually had that in quotes because he was quoting another thinker when he said that famous line about the arc of the moral universe. So a website called Quote Investigator has a blog that traces the use of various quotes through history. And it followed this quote back from President Obama in 2009, through Dr. King, through Rabbi Jacob Cohn in 1940, through Reverend Seth Brooks in 1934, through a column in the Cleveland Plain Dealer in 1932, where the columnist noted that this was just an unattributed adage that was posted in his church. And a reader of that 1932 column recognized the quote as belonging to Theodore Parker. Do you guys know who Theodore Parker is? Yeah, he's a Unitarian minister. He's one of us. I'm always so excited when I see one. So, according to Wikipedia and American Transcendentalism Web, Theodore Parker was born in 1810 as the youngest child in a large farming family in Lexington, Massachusetts. He was described as bright and witty and ambitious, and at the age of 19, he walked the 10 miles from his house to Harvard College to enroll. And he was accepted. He passed all the entrance exams, but he couldn't afford tuition. So he continued to work the family farm, and he studied between the farm chores and after farm chores were done, and then walked the 10 miles back to Cambridge to take his exams. And he finished all of his Harvard studies in 1 year. Pretty smart. And the program usually took 3 years. But he was not awarded a degree because he couldn't pay his school fees. So from the time he finished his studies in 1831, he started teaching, and he taught in Watertown, Massachusetts, and he applied. He thought he would be a lawyer, but he finally decided he really was called to divinity. So he applied to Harvard Divinity School. And this time, he actually had married a woman who had a family that was big into the Unitarian Universalist movement, or it wasn't UU, sorry, it was just U back then, the Unitarian movement. And so they think that probably her family paid his school fees because he was actually awarded a divinity, Masters of Divinity. So he accepted a position as a pastor in 1837, and he also, at the same time, became part of the struggle within the Unitarian Church to move Unitarian from its Calvinist roots towards a more transcendentalist belief. So Calvinists were really big on predestination. We may not know who's going to heaven, but God does, and no matter what you do on earth, God's going to take you or not based on his plan. And transcendentalists were more believing that people and nature are inherently good and that your works on earth do matter. So this transition away from the kind of Calvinist predestination to the more transcendentalist Unitarianism thought, it did actually happen, because, we still believe that that each person is imbued with a spark of the divine, and that's nurtured in the form of the chalice in Unitarian Universalist congregations all over the world. But he didn't get to see that accomplished. He died at 59 before that happened. But even during his lifetime, his particular brand of Unitarian theology became very popular, even though it was considered very unorthodox. He didn't adhere to orthodoxy, and at times his fellowship was actually in question. But according to Wikipedia, Parker's congregation grew to 2,000. That was 3% of Boston's population back then. Can you imagine a Unitarian church of 2,000? Be awesome. And his congregation included really well-known figures like Louisa May Alcott and William Lloyd Garrison and Julia Ward Howe and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. In fact, Stanton is quoted as calling his sermons soul-satisfying, and she said that she credited him with introducing her to the idea of a heavenly mother in the Trinity. And Parker was increasingly known for preaching what he and his followers identified as prophetic Christian social activism. Social activism was a real focus for Parker. By the mid-1840s, Parker was involved in every single controversial social issue of his day. According to biographer John Wyke Chadwick, Parker was involved in the peace movement, the temperance movement, education, the condition of women, penal legislation, prison discipline, moral and mental destitution of the rich, physical destitution of the poor. But the cause that he was most dedicated to, the cause that he's most well known for supporting, was the abolition of slavery. And on this subject, he was not just writing sermons, he was not just sending strongly worded letters. He was actually out there organizing resistance, organizing mass protests in the streets, sheltering slaves in his own home. He was even tried for obstruction of justice when he interfered with the recapture of a fugitive named Anthony Burns. And Boston, I don't know if you guys know this, but during the entire period from the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act in 1850 all the way up till the Civil War started in 1861, Boston only had 2 fugitive slaves returned. Whole city, only 2. And that was in large part because of his movement and his drive and his passion inspiring the people to get up in arms about this. Theodore Parker's version of the quote was published in a collection of sermons in 1853. His quote is from the sermon titled Of Justice and Conscience. Look at the facts of the world. You see a continual and progressive triumph of the right. I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one, and my eye reaches but a little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. From what I see, I am sure it bends toward justice. But are we really bending toward justice? Listening to the news today, it feels like we're on a hamster wheel where we keep rising higher and higher and higher, but we keep looping back and looping back and looping back. And we never seem to get closer to our goal of equality. This is going back, this is not just recent news, this is going back like last year. Did you guys hear about that AI chatbot that Microsoft designed to engage people on Twitter? It was supposed to be like casual and playful engagement on Twitter. Well, let's just say that Tay was not casual or playful for very long. They had to pull Tay because within 24 hours, Tay was tweeting out a mishmash of racist, misogynistic things that I can't really read from the pulpit. Tay was meant to learn from us how to be human, how to react in a human way. And what did Tay learn? Tay learned to be inhumane, all about inhumanity. And, speaking of Twitter, our current president, number 45, who's infamous for his casual and playful tweets, he wonders why we do not have more immigrants from Norway. That's the latest controversy, which I'm sure you've all heard ad nauseum, including the expletives. Well, according to Forbes, Norway has a stable economy, a vibrant private sector, plentiful natural resources, and an extensive social safety net. According to Ann Jones, a writer for the left-leaning publication The Nation, which, by the way, was founded by abolitionists in 1865, Norway has made community and equality the cornerstone of their culture. So there is regulation of business, and that's because it's the goal of the state to make sure that business success is not built upon the backs of the powerless. Taxes are high, yeah, and that's because everyone is expected to contribute, but also benefits are high. Everyone gets health insurance, paid maternity and paternity leave, public schools, public universities. Why aren't we getting more people coming in from Norway? Yeah. So we do have people who are coming in from less stable countries. I'm just going to go into a little bit about Haiti. So, as far as Haiti goes, Amy Wilentz was also writing for The Nation. She's been on the ground in Haiti for a number of years, and this is what she sees as the conditions in Haiti. Haiti has no national health care, no social security, no pensions, no taxes, no labor regulations, a tiny national coffer, no organized sanitation, sporadic electricity, very few jobs, substandard to sub-substandard housing. And yet, the Haitians who emigrate contribute to American economy. They contribute as doctors, engineers, attorneys, academics, all sorts of fields, not just the low-skilled jobs that some people in power attribute to them. In my unscientific experience, Haitians and Haitian Americans that I know are hardworking and kind and generous, and our country would be immeasurably poorer without them. And there are also famous Haitians whose work has enriched all of us, such as Alexandre Dumas, Three Musketeers, yeah? John James Audubon. I drive past the Audubon Center at Mill Groves on the way here every time I come. And our whole country would be smaller if it weren't for Haiti. Part of the reason that Napoleon was willing to sell off the Louisiana Territory, which was a staggering 828,000 miles of land that stretched all the way from Canada down to New Orleans in the Delta. He sold that off because Haitian freedom fighters were decimating the French army. He lost about a third of the troops that he sent down there. And Napoleon needed the money and the troops to continue that fight. And W.B.E.Z. Chicago names the Haitian-born Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable, whose name I just butchered, the father of Chicago. Du Sable was born in 1745 in Santo Domingo, which is present-day Haiti, to a sailor and an enslaved African. His mother was killed in a Spanish raid, so he swam out to his father's ship and took refuge there. His father took him in, educated him in France, and then brought him back to New Orleans. And he and a friend established a trading company where they would travel up and down the Mississippi. Well, at a certain point, he decided that he was just going to establish a trading post in Chicago, which we now pronounce as Chicago. And his trading post stood about where Tribune Tower stands now, like actual founder. So I'm going to skip the whole part about El Salvador because it's sad. I just wanted to say that as far as El Salvador goes, sending back people to El Salvador, the CIA even acknowledges that El Salvador is beset by one of the world's highest homicide rates and pervasive criminal gangs. The CIA says that. So why do we think it's okay to send people back? I feel like we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We're kicking out taxpayers. We're making them retreat to the shadows, return to the poverty and violence they've escaped, and that their remittances at home help to ameliorate. We don't have to pay as much foreign aid as we would because we have people working hard here, contributing to our economy, and then also contributing to their home economies. It's like our foot. When Lady Liberty looks out over New York Harbor, sharing her words of welcome, she does not say, "Give me your comfortably well-off, yearning to buy a latte and avocado toast." You know the words that she says? She says, "Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame with conquering limbs astride from land to land. Here at our sea-washed sunset gate shall stand a mighty woman with a torch whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows the world-wide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. Keep ancient lands your storied pomp," cries she, with silent lips. "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these the homeless tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." So I'm almost to the end of my time here, and I haven't delivered these words of hope or the scientific advice about how to put yourself in someone else's shoes that I was hoping to leave you with. Because you know what? I don't have a magic bullet to fix our social discourse. I don't hold the magic key that'll make Twitter kind. Now, I do have a story to tell you. It's from a book that I was reading because I'm not a great housekeeper. So I got this book, and it's like Confessions of a Reformed Slob. And you know what she says? Because, yeah, I felt better reading this book, honestly. I was like, yes, I'm not her. But anyhow, so what she says is, if you want to not live in a dirty house, you know what you do? That's gonna burn the place down. The first thing you do is you get up in the morning and you do your dishes. Now, it may take you 6 hours the first time you do it because for the past week you've been eating out of mixing bowls with a teaspoon. But the first thing you do, you get up and you do the dishes. And you know what you do the next morning? Do the dishes. That's it. You get up in the morning and you do the dishes because you're going to keep having to eat. There's still going to be dirty dishes. You're not going to suddenly do the dishes and everything is perfect. No, you get up in the morning and you do the dishes, and then the next morning you do the dishes again. And the morning after that, you do the dishes again. because when you do the dishes, they're clean. And that's how we clean up social discourse. We just get in there and we do the dishes. We do the hard work. We do the hard work of listening to each other. We do the hard work of being present with each other. We don't go into other people's houses and tell them to do their dishes. We do our own dishes. We don't go around and tell other people to come in and do our dishes. We do our own dishes. So what can I leave you with? I can leave where I began. I can say, the moral arc of the universe bends towards justice. And that's not because justice is a rainbow arching through the sky, whose feet, however fast you run, you'll never find. And it's not because justice is the far horizon, and our feet, whatever path we take, will bend along the curve of the earth with justice as the homeland that we will someday reach. Justice is not unattainable like a rainbow, and it's not as inevitable as the ground beneath our feet. When I picture the moral arc of the universe bending towards justice, I picture the Greek god Hephaestus at his forge, removing a white-hot sword from the crucible and hammering it blow by blow by blow into the arc of a plowshare. Justice is not easy. Justice is not inevitable. But it is a goal we're capable of reaching. And the pot of gold under that rainbow is worth the cost. It's worth the long, hard work of loving our neighbors, learning to respect one another. It's worth understanding that nous faisons tous partie de la famille humaine, as they would say in Haiti. Y no importa de donde eres, as they would say in El Salvador. Anta murhabikan una, in case you don't speak French or Spanish or Arabic or cannot understand my terrible accent. That translates to, we are all part of the human family, and no matter where you're from, you're welcome here. Here in the United States. If you look far enough back in our ancestry, everyone is from somewhere else who comes from here. But not just here in the U.S., especially here in this fellowship. The Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Lower Bucks. You guys come together each week to learn about one another and to remind yourselves, for all of us to remind ourselves, that we are no more, we are no less, we are all one human family. Namaste and blessed be.